So, you don't know this, but this is the third time I've tried to make this video. Hopefully third time's the charm. This is our technique sheet for our watercolor, and I don't expect you to memorize everything. I have a beautiful color copy, which is behind the door when you walk in that little paper holder there. At least that's where it's supposed to be, and if 8th graders put it away, that is where it will be at the end. So we're going to learn lots of different techniques on how to do watercolor, and you're going to need to incorporate at least 7 of these techniques, I think that's what it says on the grade sheet, into your watercolor project, okay? So we're just going to go over the techniques on this one. Make sure you watch the next one as far as directions that you need to be following to get a good grade in this project. In your student supplies, you're going to find paints, you're going to find salt, you're going to find saran wrap, masking tape. This is what the toothbrush is for, those of you who have found it earlier. This is a paint tray, and it is made specifically so you can mix different colors of paint. Obviously next to the sink there should be water holders, and you're also going to always have paper towel when I am doing my watercolor techniques. So I'm going to start with just a flat wash. And flat wash is the one you guys want to use all the time, and that is going to be just when we're just kind of painting. You're just painting, you're not really thinking about value, you're just kind of filling in with a color. Now I don't want you to paint from here because this is going to get goopy and thick. Watercolor is not supposed to be thick, it's supposed to be watery. It is the first word, water. Okay, so we want to make sure we're mixing with water, and you really should be able to see the paper kind of through it. Okay, and that is our first technique. It is a flat wash, and I should probably try to go in order so I make sure I get them all. Okay, next one is a graded wash. A graded wash starts as a flat wash, but it gets faded towards the end, and we're going to do that by taking some of our paint and starting just like we did before, but now I'm going to rinse my brush and I'm going to pull this paint down so that it goes from a light to a dark or dark to light, depending upon which way you're looking at it. And that is a graded wash. Now dry brush. This is one that gets very confusing to you guys. Dry brush is not dry paint. It is dry brush. Okay, so I like to, when I'm doing dry brush, I like to get one of the square brushes, maybe not quite that big. And your brush should be dry, but the paint still needs to be wet. A lot of times we get to dry brush and people start trying to scrape the stuff out of here and paint it over here. That's not what it is. You're actually, sometimes for dry brush, the best ones are going to be the ones that are used for the glazes and stuff, like the really not good paint brushes, because they separate out a little bit better. But you're going to want to kind of separate that out, and then we're going to use the individual bristles of the brush to make either line patterns or this kind of like where you push it together and make a pattern like that. So that's dry brush. Again, paint is wet, brush is dry. Then we're going to have lifting out. This is really good for things like clouds. So maybe I'll mix some blue over here, make a little bit of sky going on. Lifting out is going to start like we started before with a flat wash, but this time we're going to take a crumpled up paper towel and we're going to push it to it, and when we lift it up you can see there are lighter areas here. Okay, so that is lifting out. Wet on wet should look like a little bit of a firework. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put water down because it needs to be wet, and then I'm just going to drop a little bit of paint into here. Ooh, that's a little too much. And it kind of spreads out. If it spreads out so far that it's all over your paper, then you have too much water or too much paint. But that's wet into wet. Wet into wet is also very similar to blending. Now I'm going to flip this over. You probably want to wait for one side to dry, but I'm not using this as a grade. So I'm going to flip that over, and blending is one of my favorite techniques. I use this a lot for actually everything. Sky, water, it gives like the illusion of depth, But what you're gonna do is you start with a flat wash of one color, and then you're going to add other color into it. So that you can see that would kind of be like water, how it goes from green to blue, okay? Then I'm gonna skip ahead here to my salt, because it needs a little bit of time to dry. So while it's wet, if you put salt in it, as the salt dries, it's going to suck up the moisture, the water, and it's gonna make like these little kind of starburst patterns that hopefully you can see here. And if you can't see that on the video, make sure you get this handout that I made for you to look at that, okay? So I'm gonna turn my blending into my salt. Dry on dry is, again, wet paint, not dry paint. Wet paint, dry paper, dry brush. And dry on dry is good for small details. So I'm gonna use a small brush for this. And all you're doing is doing like really little details. Like maybe these are your stripes on your fish or on a zebra, or I don't know, you've got dots on something. So dry on dry is little details like that. And you can do it on paper or you can do it over a color. And we're going to talk more about that in the next video. Saran wrap. Than a square, but for this, that's fine. You paint over it and let it dry. Don't peel it off now. Once it dries, we can peel it off, and that space will be protected so I could go back and do other things into it. And then our last technique that we're going to be learning is splatter. And I use splatter a lot as well. I use it a lot like if I need a speckled texture, like on sand or rocks, things like that. So you might put one color down first. So I've got green in my yellow. So you might put one color down first, like maybe I'll put some yellow down. And then you do kind of need to let this one dry. So I'm going to talk about two other things while that's drying. First, I'm going to go ahead and mix up a little bit of brown because I'm going to speckle some brown and maybe a little bit of black on top of it as well. So I'll mix that up while it's drying. But I also want to talk to you about how to take care of these paints because it is unfortunate, but sometimes 8th graders don't take care of things, and you might come and get these paints out and they might look like a mess. So what you're going to do to clean them, like I can see I've got a little bit of green in this yellow, is you need clean water, maybe even a little bit cleaner than this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush, and with clean water I'm going to run across there, rinse this, and then dry off the brush, and then pick up a little bit more of that green, rinse it, and you're just going to keep doing that until the colors that got mixed are out. Of course, the preference is that you guys don't mix the colors in the first place. So we'll see how that goes. Also, these brushes are not the brushes that are in the paint cabinet. Those ones are pretty destroyed because people have been using them in resistant things like that. We're going to have to figure out some sort of way to keep these separated from everybody else's. And it's either going to be I'm going to collect them every day, or I will give you a set that is yours to work with, and you have to hand me back in a perfect set of paint brushes at the end of the project. Okay, so in a perfect world, I would let that dry just a little bit longer, but I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit more pigment to this black over here, and then I'm going to take this paint, not paintbrush, the toothbrush, which is with all the junky brushes, and you need to cover up the areas that you don't want it to get on because it's going to get everywhere, but you just kind of flick it and it's going to give you that speckled kind of pattern. So here they are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 different techniques. Go ahead and get the paper from me, and you can go ahead and start working on your techniques. Once you have your techniques done, you need to look at your photograph and you need to plan where all these techniques are going to go. You might want to watch the next video before you do that so you have a better understanding of how we might use these techniques. But that is pretty much our project. Here you can see this dried enough. You can see this really nice texture that the saran wrap made, and also the nice texture that the salt made.